And hello to everyone who wants to learn about orchid growing. I'm mainly making this video for the Buy Nothing Project group that I'm in on Facebook. I offer free gardening advice to the people in that group, and some people have been asking about orchids. So we have two orchids in front of us. One is obviously not okay. Oh, obviously not okay. And one is obviously very healthy. So when you first get an orchid from Lowe's or Home Depot or any large product orchid seller, you're going to get it packed in sphagnum moss. Okay, so all of these roots and stuff will be shoved into a tiny little plastic thing, and it'll be packed with sphagnum moss, and it'll probably be blooming. You'll most likely buy this when it's blooming. It has beautiful flowers, and what you don't understand or realize is what this plant has gone through before it's gotten to you. So essentially, they want to get these orchids out as fast as possible, and so they like to keep them a little bit more moist than they like to be, but they're also in a very hot environment and they're being forced to bloom. So essentially they'll just turn the heat off and pack them full of fertilizers, force them to bloom, and then get them out on the shelves. And so by the time it gets to your house, it looks like a perfectly healthy, happy plant, and it's totally not a healthy, happy plant. So after the bloom has died, what you want to do is the stem will be growing out from in between two leaves, and you want to cut it as far as you can flush with the leaf without harming the leaf. You want to make sure that you use sterile scissors when you do this. They're very finicky about bacteria and moisture and all of that stuff. And so after you've cut the stem off, you're going to take the plant, pull it out of its container, flip it over, and unpack that sphagnum moss. You're going to have another planting media such as bark chips. That's what I like to use to plant the orchid in. In the wild, orchids grow clinging to the side of tree branches. I know a lot of people didn't know that. And so it likes a very dry environment. One of the reasons why it has some roots, these are called aerial roots, and those will absorb water from the outside air. So you will unpack the entire thing and you'll turn it over and you'll look for black roots. I'm just going to try to get this to focus. It's not focusing. Okay, so you will look for black roots. All of the little stubby roots were black roots from when I got this orchid. This was an orchid that I tried to save and it was just too far gone. So I cut all of the rotted, black, obviously dead roots off of the bottom of the orchid. And then you will plant it in this planting medium. So in order to do that, you're just going to make sure that there's enough space and material to cover the roots. You'll set the orchid down in there. I know this one's looking very, very sad. And then you will cover the living roots with it. Now, to water your orchid, you will want, first of all, when you do repot, you want these bark chips to begin wet. So you want to kind of, put them in a bowl and get them wet before you repot your new orchid. When it's time to water it after that, there are two different fertilizers that I like to rotate through. I get them at Lowe's. One of them is for leaf production, and that's what I use in the summertime. And one of them is for bloom production, and that's what I use when it's starting to get cold in the fall before I turn the heat on, because that's generally when our orchids will bloom, is when it gets cold outside. It won't necessarily bloom in an air-conditioned space because it's too dry. And there's my cat, Callie. Because it's too dry for that to happen. And it needs to have like moist, cool air in order for it to bloom. Okay. So now you've got your new orchid in some nice moist chips. The chips have dried. I use these containers. You can get them on Amazon. I'm happy to send you a link to the ones that I use. If you'd like that, just request it from me. And you just fill a bowl of water and you put this down into the bowl of water and you let everything soak and get nice and wet. You're going to want to do this anytime it's dry. The outer leaves. So once you've gotten this up out of the bowl, all of this is nice and moist, and you'll see that all the living roots that have touched water, they turn bright green. If the roots don't turn bright green, they need a little bit of a trim. After you've done that, you'll probably have gotten some water in between the leaves and down into the top here, and that will rot the bulb. So you want to take a paper towel and kind of shove it in there and dab any extra water that's gotten in between the leaves, because that will cause the bulb to die, and then it'll cause root rot. Often people do overwater their orchids because a leaf will begin to look something like this. And the instinct is to then water it more. It's not necessarily that. If you've been keeping up with the watering and you've been doing the same thing over and over again, but consistently, but suddenly it's having a different result, it doesn't have to do with the consistency of your watering. What it has to do with is it's possible that the planting media has gone bad and it's starting to get a little bit acidic and full of bacteria. And so you have to change that out. And when you do that, you want to look on the underside of the plant again for any of those roots, because what's happening is you're watering it, and it's more likely, it's likely that some of the roots have died. And so you're watering it, but it's still not getting the water, and it's actually starting to rot under there. So if any of your orchids need first aid, I am absolutely happy to take care of them. You would just have to drop them off to me and I could get them all fixed up. So just message me. And if any of you have any questions after you watch this video, if I haven't covered something, then just let me know. There's a great YouTube channel dedicated specifically to orchids. I think she's named My Orchid Girl or something like that. If you want me to send you a link to her channel, that's fine. But what I've given you is a really good basic guide for the type of orchids that most people get at like Lowe's and Home Depot as gifts. All right, I hope I helped you, and have a great Labor Day weekend.